Well, hello, and here we are, April 15th, and we're once again looking at a psalm, and that psalm happens to be Psalm 84, all about longing for home. And I could say more about that certainly as we look forward to our trip home. The psalmist's voice in this psalm is one where the gloom fades away and he breaks free from the gloom. He's saying, "How lovely is your dwelling place." This is the language of love in full bloom. The New Testament equivalent would be speaking of brotherly love, which is even more amazing than the Boston Marathon. I must mention here, because it'd be a little weird if I didn't, how eagerly a person waits for the finish line when you are running in a marathon. Not just to finish the race, but for the whole experience leading up to and including crossing the finish line. That, for me, was intensified in the Boston Marathon because of what is known as the Heartbreak Hill, which is the last of the Newton Hills. And it pretty much takes all of the muscles in your leg and ties them in a gigantic knot. And so as I was getting ready for the final push, I slowed down a little bit to a walk to grab my final water and Gatorade, and instantly the cramps attacked my legs. And I'm like, oh no, how am I going to run? But I somehow forced myself to get my feet moving and picked up the pace into a run, although not the pace I would have preferred. Still, I was running, and I ran through the whole Boston Marathon. I didn't walk in any portion of the race other than to pick up my hydration. And so, all your prayers certainly helped. And I gotta say, if I had any negativity or negative thoughts going on in my head, I would not have been able to do that. I had to stay focused on the race and focused on all of those who were supporting me in the race and thinking about my wife and my son who were cheering me on in Newton. And so I made it and managed even to pick up the pace even more for the famous right on Hereford and left on Boylston. Well, I might as well say how I did too. I finished in 3 hours, 16 minutes, and 1 second for an average pace of 7 minutes and 29 seconds per mile. I was 5,916th place out of 25,785 who finished overall. I was 5,000th out of 14,578 men, and in 121st place in the male 44 to 59 age group, which had 1,529 men total. So there you have it by the numbers. Now back to the psalm, and we'll look at verse numbers here for a little bit. Verse 2 speaks of crying out in a loud voice, longing for the courts of the Lord's house, but not just for a building or a physical place. The true longing is for the living God. Then, as verse 3 mentions the sparrow, it's a reminder that the temple courtyards were open to the sky, and the temple eaves would have been good nesting places for birds as well. Verse 4 is the first of 3 Beatitudes in the psalm, bringing with them the reminder that those who have easy access to God's house often complain, while those who can't be in God's house for one reason or another are filled with appreciation for it. Verse 5 presents another key thought. Even if the psalmist can't be in the house of God, he can still be with God, who gives him strength to endure his time away. Like the huge crowds of Boston spectators on every inch of the course, the psalmist cheers on those who are pushing through in their pilgrimage to see God's house. Well, I better wrap this devotion up before I talk too much more about Boston. I'll have many more stories to share, I'm sure, in the days to come. So we'll skip to the final verse, and that is also the final beatitude of this psalm. And the psalmist, by his disciplined response to his nostalgic longing for the Lord's house, has found the blessing that is also described in John chapter 20, verse 29, a blessing which applies to all of us. Jesus said to Thomas, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Our present glimpses of God's grace by faith and our longing for the last day also only serve to spur us on to respond to God's mercies in Jesus Christ with delighted trust in the Lord. Well, there you have the devotion. I'll look forward to talking with you again real soon, probably from back in Beatrice tomorrow. God bless.